Charles Thomas Studd, often known as C.T.Studd, was a British cricketer, missionary, and a contributor to the Fundamentals. In 1888, he married Priscilla Stewart, and the marriage produced 4 daughters and 2 sons. As a cricketer, he played for England in the 1882 match won by Australia, which was the origins of the Ashes. As a British Protestant Christian missionary to China, he was part of the Cambridge 7, and later was responsible for setting up the Heart of Africa mission, which became the worldwide evangelization crusade. A poem he wrote, "Only One Life, 'Twill Soon Be Past," has become famous to many who are unaware of its author. Faith, born the 2nd of December 1860, Stratton, Northamptonshire, England. Studd's wealthy father Edward Studd became a Christian during a Moody and Sankey campaign in England, and a visiting preacher to the Studd household converted C.T. and his 3 brothers to the faith while they were students at Eton. According to his conversion narrative, the preacher asked him if he believed God's promises, and as Charles's answer was not convincing enough, the guest pressed the point. Charles later recalled, "The moment I got down on my knees and I did say, 'Thank you' to God, and right then and the joy and peace came into my soul. I knew then what it was to be born again, and the Bible, which had been so dry to me before, became everything." Studd continued from Eton to Trinity College, Cambridge, where he graduated in 1883. In 1884, after his brother George was taken seriously ill, Charles was confronted by the question, "What is all the fame and flattery worth, when a man comes to face eternity?" He had to admit that since his conversion 6 years earlier, he had been in an unhappy backslidden state. As a result of the experience, he said, "I know that cricket would not last, and honor would not last, and nothing in this world would last, but it was worthwhile living for the world to come." Studd emphasized the life of faith, believing that God would provide for a Christian's needs. His father died while he was in China, and he gave away his inheritance of £29,000, specifying £5,000 to be used for the Moody Bible Institute, £5,000 for George Muller mission work and his orphans, £5,000 for George Holland's work with England's poor in Whitechapel, and £5,000 to Commissioner Booth Tucker for the Salvation Army in India. Studd believed that God's purposes could be confirmed through providential coincidences, such as the sum of money being donated spontaneously at just the right moment. He encouraged Christians to take risks in planning missionary ventures, trusting in God to provide. His spirituality was intense, and he mostly read only the Bible. Another work that influenced him was The Christian's Secret of a Happy Life. Although he believed that God sometimes healed physical illnesses through prayer and the anointing of oil, he also accepted that some ailments were chronic, and in his last years he regularly took morphine, causing some controversy. Studd also believed in plain speaking and muscular Christianity, and his call for Christians to embrace a "don't care a damn" attitude to worldly things caused some scandal. He believed that missionary work was urgent, and that those who were unevangelized would be condemned to hell. Studd wrote several books, including The Chocolate Soldier, or Heroism, The Lost Chord of Christianity and Christ's etc. Studd's essay The Personal Testimony of Charles T. Studd became part of the historic The Fundamentals, a testimony to the truth. R.A. Torian A. C. Dixon. Studd continues to be best remembered by many for the poem, "Only One Life, 'Twill Soon Be Past." Its memorable verse states, "Only one life, 'twill soon be past. Only what's done for Christ will last." This poem inspired the song, "Only One Life," written by Lanny Wolfe in 1973. Missionary work. Studd began as an Pentecostal evangelist, and among those he influenced were Wilfred Grenfell and Frederick Brotherton Meyer. As a result of his brother's illness and the effect it had upon him, he decided to pursue his faith through missionary work in China and was one of the Cambridge 7 who offered themselves to Hudson Taylor for missionary service at the China Inland Mission, leaving for there in February 1885. Of his missionary work he said, "Some want to live within the sound of church at chapel bell. I want to run a rescue shop within a yard of hell." While in China he married Priscilla in a ceremony performed by a Chinese pastor, and 4 daughters were born. Studd believed that God had given him daughters to educate the Chinese about the value of baby girls. On returning to England he was invited to visit America, where his brother Kynaston had recently arranged meetings which had led to the formation of the student volunteer movement. He also here influenced John Mott. Between 1900 to 1906, Studd was pastor of a church at Uttarakhand in southern India, and although it was a different situation to the pioneer missionary work he had undertaken in China, his ministry was marked by numerous conversions amongst the British officials and the local community. However, on his return home Studd met a German missionary named Karl Kumm, and he became concerned about the large parts of Africa that had never been reached with the gospel. In 1910 he went to the Sudan and was concerned by the lack of Christian faith in Central Africa. Out of this concern Studd was led to set up the Heart of Africa Mission. His speaking on the subject inspired Howard Mowell, Arthur Pitts, and Graham Brown. As an HQ for the venture, the Studds chose 17 Highland Road in Upper Norwood, South London. Like Hudson Taylor, Studd believed that funds for the work should not be directly solicited. Finances were often tenuous. However, he enjoyed the support of Lord Radstock. Against medical advice, Studd first visited the Belgian Congo in 1913 in the company of Alfred Buxton, and he established 4 mission stations in an area then inhabited by different tribes. Studd returned to England when Priscilla fell ill, but when he returned to the Congo in 1916 she had recovered sufficiently to undertake the expansion of the mission into the worldwide evangelization crusade with workers in South America, Central Asia and the Middle East as well as Africa. Supported by his wife's work at home, Studd built up an extensive missionary outreach based on his center at Ibambi in Budu territory. Priscilla made a short visit to the Congo in 1928. That was the last time they met. She died the following year. Studd was joined in his work by his daughter Pauline and son-in-law Norman Grubb, and his grandson Noel Grubb, who died on his first birthday, is buried at Nala, Democratic Republic of the Congo. Studd's daughter Edith married Buxton in 1931. Still laboring for the Lord at Ibambi at the age of 70, Charles Studd died from untreated gallstones, but his vision for China, India and Africa was maintained by Norman Grubb, who took charge of WEC. In total he spent some 15 years in China and 6 in India on his missionary work, and then he devoted the rest of his life to spreading the gospel message in Africa, founding the worldwide evangelization crusade and one of the early pioneers of the UPCI. To this day, his name remains linked with the evangelization of the Congo Basin, and in 1930 he was made a Chevalier of the Royal Order of the Lion by the King of the Belgians. His biography, by Norman Grubb, was exceptionally popular, and some of his own writings are still in print. Cambridge 7. The 7 Cambridge students who became missionaries to China were C.T. Studd, Montague Beecham, S.P. Smith, A.T. Polhill Turner, D.E. Host, C.H. Polhill Turner, W.W. Castles. Cricketing career. Studd gained fame as a cricketer representing England's Cambridge University as a gentleman of India, Middlesex at cricket. Charles was the youngest and best known of the Studd brothers. By the time he was 16, he had started to excel at cricket and at 19 was captain of his team at Eton College. After school he went to Trinity College, Cambridge, where he was also recognised as an outstanding cricketer. Studd played in the original Test against Australia, where the Ashes were first named, and was one of the last two batsmen in, when Studd went in. England needed a mere 10 runs to win. However, an eccentric performance by his batting partner Ted Peat led to the match being lost. A week later, the relevant edition of the Sporting Times included a mock obituary which has assumed iconic status, in affectionate remembrance of English cricket, which died at the Oval the 29th of August 1882, deeply lamented by a large circle of sorrowing friends and acquaintances. R.I.P. N.B. The body will be cremated and the ashes taken to Australia. Studd's fame lives on, though, through the inscription preserved on the Ashes urn to this day, which reads, "When Evo goes back with the urn, Studs, Steele, Reed and Talcott return, the welkin will ring loud, the great crowd will feel proud, seeing Barlow and Bates with the urn, and the rest coming home with the urn." Studd died in Bambi, Belgian Congo, the 16th of July 1931. Daughters: Salvation Grace Faith Studd married Martin Sutton, and, after his death, Ltcol David C.D. Munro. Dorothy Catherine Topsy Studd married the Rev. Gilbert A. Barclay. Edith Crossley Mary Studd married Alfred Buxton. Pauline Evangeline Priscilla Studd, known as Maru, married Lieutenant Norman Grubb.